Hello everyone. Today's story takes place in British Columbia, a province on Canada's west coast. BC borders the Pacific Ocean to the west and the Rocky Mountains to the east. Known for its mild climate and rich forest resources, the province's southwestern area is dominated by the Vancouver metropolitan region, with Vancouver itself being its largest city. Port Coquitlam is a city in this metro area, located about 17 miles east of Vancouver, at the confluence of the Fraser River. This area is home to many long-established Indigenous communities. Our story unfolds here on a Tuesday in early 2022. That day, local police received a tip accusing a farm owner in Port Coquitlam of potentially stockpiling illegal firearms. Canada has stringent firearm regulations, requiring all guns to be registered and placing strict conditions on legal gun ownership. Acting on this tip, police immediately obtained a search warrant and headed to the farm with plans for a surprise inspection. Upon arrival, they found that the farm owner wasn't present. They showed the warrant to a female caretaker and began a thorough search. The farm was vast, over 150,000 square feet, about 20 football fields worth, and primarily consisted of a pig farm and slaughterhouse. Beside the pig pens, they found a trailer that served as the owner's living quarters. Sure enough, they discovered unregistered firearms inside. But there was something even more unsettling. It appeared that the farm owner might be involved in more than illegal gun possession. Police found women's clothing and jewelry scattered around the farm, some of it heavily stained with blood. The sizes varied, indicating the clothes belonged to multiple individuals. When questioned, the farm owner's girlfriend told officers that the clothes and jewelry didn't belong to her. She also mentioned that although he wasn't married, the owner often brought women to the farm for overnight stays. Inside the trailer, officers came across an asthma inhaler. DNA tests later matched it to a woman who had recently gone missing. This discovery raised suspicions that the farm owner might be linked not only to illegal firearms, but potentially to a murder. With preliminary evidence in hand, police obtained another warrant and returned to the farm for a deeper search, determined to investigate any connection to the missing woman. During the extended search, they uncovered bondage equipment and a travel bag. DNA evidence from the bag revealed traces of 4 different women, all of whom were later found dead within a 230-foot radius of the trailer. Autopsies confirmed visible injuries on all 4 bodies, though the remains were degraded. One victim had clearly been shot, while the cause of death for the others couldn't be determined. Though the 4 deaths had occurred at different times, all had happened at least 3 days before their discovery. 3 out of the 4 victims had been dismembered with clean, precise cuts, similar to how animals are butchered. The farm owner's name was Robert Pickton. DNA from the bondage equipment matched his. Police also found a revolver with 1 bullet missing in the trailer's laundry area. Meanwhile, the police had been investigating reports from Vancouver's East Side neighborhood, where numerous sex workers and drug addicts had gone missing, most of them women. The owner of the asthma inhaler, found on Pickton's property, was one of these missing women. A week later, Robert Pickton was formally arrested. He showed no distress, calmly admitting to firearm possession, but denying any connection to the missing women. After prolonged questioning, he remained composed and uncooperative. So police decided to try something different. They brought in an undercover officer, dressed him as a prisoner, and placed him in the same cell as Pickton. Surprisingly, this approach worked. Thinking he was talking to a fellow inmate, Pickton opened up, describing his crimes in shocking detail. He admitted to luring women to his farm from Vancouver's east side, bringing them into his trailer, and then killing them, disposing of their bodies on the property. Pickton boasted about having killed 49 women and expressed frustration over not reaching 50, blaming his capture on carelessness. He was unaware that his entire confession was being recorded on camera. 8 days after his arrest, police confirmed the identities of 2 women found on his farm using DNA analysis. Robert Pickton, 53, was then charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Pickton was the middle child in a family that had been pig farming for 4 generations. His grandfather had purchased land near a mental hospital in Port Coquitlam to establish the family farm. In the early 1960s, due to a highway construction project, the government bought the land, forcing the family to relocate. In 1963, when Robert was 14, his parents bought the current farm for $18,000. Back then, the land was a desolate marsh, and the family built a house and re-established the pig farm. Robert's older sister, Linda, wasn't raised on the farm because her parents sent her to live with relatives in Vancouver, believing a girl shouldn't grow up around pigs. Growing up, Robert had plenty of pork to eat, but his parents worked tirelessly, with little time to care for their children. Robert and his younger brother David were often dirty and unkempt, reeking of pig manure. Classmates avoided them, calling them piggy as an insult. This bullying made Robert resent school, and his grades dropped. Eventually, he was placed in special education classes. At age 12, Robert briefly found companionship in a calf he had raised, but his parents slaughtered it without telling him. Devastated, he swore off pets. At 14, Robert dropped out of school and began working at a butcher shop. 7 years later, he returned to help manage the family pig farm. Over time, with Port Coquitlam's development, the farm's land value skyrocketed. By 1994, when Robert was 45, the property was worth over $7.2 million CAD. The family gradually sold portions of the land to developers, bringing in millions. However, Robert continued to live in his trailer next to the farm even after his brother moved out. In 1996, Robert and David founded a non-profit called the Piggy Palace Good Time Society. Ostensibly, it was for community events, but in reality, it was an excuse to throw wild parties at the farm, offering free drinks and roast pork to guests. The rest is a chilling reminder of how dark some stories can become. However, in reality, these dinners weren't just charity events, they had a darker purpose. Their real aim was to attract sex workers, using free meals to draw in large crowds. Each event brought in an estimated 2,000 to 3,000 people, including members of the Hells Angels gang. The Hells Angels, an outlaw motorcycle club with a worldwide presence, are considered a criminal organization by law enforcement. But these charity events didn't last long. Afterward, Robert moved on from using public events to lure sex workers, and instead began persuading women from Vancouver's downtown east side to come back to his farm. This wasn't his first run-in with the law either. In 1997, at 48 years old, Robert was charged with attempted murder. That year, he had met a woman named Wendy in the downtown east side and enticed her with money and drugs to go with him to his farm. Wendy had no idea that Robert had an unusual interest in BDSM and would often request that women act as the submissive partner while he used violence or various tools on them. At his trailer on the farm, Robert handcuffed Wendy, catching her off guard. Realizing Robert's dangerous intentions, Wendy resisted and tried to leave, but Robert blocked her. In a desperate attempt to protect herself, Wendy grabbed a knife from a nearby table and stabbed him. Though Robert quickly overpowered her and took the knife, Wendy managed to escape. She ran to the street, and luckily, a passing car stopped to help her. Both Wendy and Robert were injured from the scuffle, so they ended up at the same hospital, where Wendy reported the incident to the police. Officers found a pair of handcuffs in Robert's coat pocket, with a key that unlocked Wendy's cuffs. They also collected his clothes and rubber boots as evidence. Despite being charged with attempted murder, Robert posted $2,000 bail and was released. Because Wendy was a sex worker and struggled with addiction, her testimony was considered unreliable, and Robert escaped punishment. For women like Wendy, life was filled with constant danger, not only from violence, but from the threat to their lives. Toward the end of the 20th century, many women in Vancouver's downtown east side began to go missing. Since most of these women were sex workers or from marginalized backgrounds, their disappearances didn't receive much attention. Their transient lifestyles made it hard to tell if they were missing or had simply moved elsewhere. As the number of missing women increased, police started to suspect there might be a serial killer preying on vulnerable women. A man named Bill, who had once worked at Robert's farm, told police the place felt eerie. He described Robert as quiet, strange, and prone to bringing unfamiliar women home overnight. Bill even suspected Robert might be connected to the recent disappearances. The police began secretly surveilling Robert. Rather than acting too soon, they monitored his movements, particularly his trips to the red light district in downtown East Side. Despite his suspicious behavior, they still lacked solid evidence to make an arrest. 2 years after Wendy's escape, Vancouver police offered a $100,000 reward for information on the missing women cases. But as more women continued to vanish, some officers began to suspect that this was more than isolated disappearances. They were dealing with a serial killer. A popular American TV show, America's Most Wanted, aired a segment on the missing women from Canada, and the public's attention turned to the case. Under mounting pressure, the reward was doubled to $200,000. Tips poured in, and one particularly disturbing report claimed that a fridge on Robert's farm was full of human meat. When police confronted him, Robert refused entry, and without a warrant, they couldn't search his property. With more women continuing to disappear, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and Vancouver Police formed a joint task force to investigate. Although Robert remained a key suspect, they struggled to find grounds for a search warrant. 5 months later, a tip suggested that Robert might have illegal firearms on his farm. This gave the police the opportunity they needed. On February 5, 2002, police raided Robert's farm. Their search uncovered not only illegal firearms, but also disturbing evidence related to the missing women, revealing the largest serial murder case in Canadian history. 4 months after his arrest, police conducted a thorough search of the property, aiming to find more evidence. Given the vast area of the farm and the condition of the remains, which had either decomposed, been scavenged by animals, or even ground up and mixed with pig meat, the search was challenging and took a year and a half to complete. Over 60,000 pieces of evidence were collected, with around 80 DNA samples, including both male and female profiles. Following years of investigation, police confirmed the identities of several victims and continued to add to the charges against Robert. 3 years after his arrest, Robert faced 27 counts of first-degree murder. In January 2006, 4 years after his arrest, his trial began in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. Due to media restrictions, many details were withheld from the public. To simplify the case, the court decided to focus initially on 6 specific charges before addressing the remaining 20. Throughout the trial, prosecutors detailed the gruesome state of the victims' remains. Witnesses also testified, including a former farmhand who described a chilling scene she witnessed one night, Robert working on a woman's body in his slaughterhouse. With over 128 witnesses and mounting evidence, the jury ultimately convicted Robert on 6 counts of second-degree murder. He received a life sentence with no parole for 25 years, the maximum for his charges. Both the prosecution and defense appealed, but Canada's Supreme Court upheld the original sentence. Although Robert faced additional charges for the remaining 20 murders, authorities decided against further prosecution, citing the significant cost and the lack of impact on Robert's already severe sentence. In 2013, families of the victims sued the Vancouver police and the RCMP, accusing them of failing to protect their loved ones. A year later, both parties reached a settlement, with each victim's family receiving compensation. In 2016, a controversial book supposedly written by Robert was published, sparking outrage, and was swiftly pulled from shelves. Now 75 years old, Robert remains in prison. His horrific crimes and the pain he caused the victims' families are remembered as one of Canada's darkest chapters. The tragedy of the pig farmer killer serves as a haunting reminder of society's responsibility to protect all individuals, regardless of their circumstances, and the importance of justice, no matter how delayed.